We are thrilled to announce that this fall we will be featuring a class called Game Development and Design, taught by Gage Herrmann. So I'd like to bring on Gage into our conversation now. Welcome, Mr. Herrmann.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We have this class, Game Development and Design. We're really pleased to be hosting it and offering it. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to offer this class.
Sure thing. Yeah, so I have played video games since I was a kid, and when I became a Christian and got married and started spending more time with my family and stuff, I've kind of, I moved away from that sort of phase of young life where I'm like addicted to games and playing them all the time and things like that, to just sort of occasional playing games. But I got into more. I started my career as a programmer in about 2010, and I got into actually wanting to make games, and so I started doing that as a hobby. And so basically, as I matured in my faith and came to know more about classical education with my own children, I started to wonder. I started to sort of ask questions about this hobby that I had, games, especially game development, and started asking questions like what are games? What kind of thing are they? I mean, are they literature? Are they movies? Are they battle simulators? I don't even, what these questions.
It depends on the game, right? I mean,
right. It can. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think there's a whole huge untapped industry, I guess, or area of thought out there that is sort of just barely being touched on by Christians and by educators, especially classical educators, and that is the world of games, and then teaching a technical skill, which is many technical skills basically, is a passion of mine as well. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing in this class. So there's a whole lot of things involved in game development.
And our society has created a world where technical skill is a good in itself,
sure,
right? Or even beyond that, or science.
Mm-hmm.
So-called science, capital S science,
yeah.
Is a religion, is a priesthood in itself, and it's technique with no heart, right? Men
right.
without chests.
Yep.
And so I think sometimes in a little group of classical educators, what we sometimes do is that we reject technique, mm-hmm. Because the heart is what's important, but really. The heart and the direction of our lives toward Christ ought to be expressing itself, right? Coming out through our fingertips.
Yep.
So, you say something really fascinating in your course description. You mentioned, what are games for? What are games? Like we're asking existential questions.
Yeah.
Then you said that students will learn what can make a game true, good, and beautiful.
Right.
Why did you put it that way?
Yeah, so I mean, those are classical values, and we want to. Well, I want to basically go. I want to. I'm still exploring this myself through games that are out now, and I'm thinking about what could be in the future. And so I try to think. I think there are a lot of obvious negative examples of games. Video games that are not true, good, and beautiful, or any of the three. and from their art style or their game design or just the debauched content in them, everyone knows the kind of things I'm talking about. And I think that's one of the areas where there's, I think, a big untapped potential for making games that are true, good, and beautiful. We have great literature. Many would argue that we have great film, right. Great poetry, great books, things like that. It's hard to say whether we have a great game yet, as far as, a game that really fits what is a game. So, you know, a game is not a movie, a game is not a book, it's something else. And so what, you know, how does that art form, that craft, what does the ideal kind of look like in that? So that's what the true, good, and beautiful is referring to.
Well, and I think that this medium, for a lot of Christians, gets a bad name. So, for example, Hollywood has run rampantly anti-Christ, but no one really questions that good films can exist and should exist, and even that Christians should make good films. And I think film is a good one to bring up, because I think that's the one that video games get compared to most often. I mean, I'm fascinated by the world of video games, but I'm not a gamer at all. I don't play.
Sure.
I taught a class on augmented reality last year, though. I've always been kind of fascinated by the world and the world of games, to the point where I watch other people play on YouTube, and different genres of games, because they each have their own hermeneutic and their own teleology. And I don't enjoy watching games where people twitch around lightning fast. I understand why that's fun. Like, I play sports. I like, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that.
Sure.
But then you have these long narratival forms. You have things that are all that are in between. You have games that are just the equivalent of rock, paper, scissors.
Yep.
You have games that are the equivalent of 3D chess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think I love the idea of, you know, kind of trying to figure out the teleology of games. What were they, you know, everything's made by God, and there's nothing new under the sun, Proverbs tells us. And I think games, even video games, are included in that. And so when I say what are games, that's kind of what I'm referring to is, you know, I tend to say I'll tend to say something like it's play, or it's battle, or it's espionage, or maybe it's even just storytelling. It really kind of depends on the game. So I'm gonna talk about all those areas, especially in the fourth quarter of the class. We're gonna really get deep into some of that stuff.
And there may be students and families who are watching this who are a little more like me. I mean, like, I love the idea of gaming and being a gamer, because I'm actually a different sort of gamer.
Sure.
I love simulations and I love tabletop games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I enjoy a little Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
I enjoy a little narration, but I also like, you know, limited set simulations.
Sure.
And I love what that does to the person, right? As you learn to deal with these, and for the same reason, I love sport. And a video game can have that sort of pedagogical and skill-based simulation.
Certainly.
But it goes beyond that, right? There truly are games out there that are beautiful, and are beautiful in different ways, not just graphically. I mean, there's
mechanically. Sorry, yeah. What I was curious. What was the last word you said? I interrupted you.
A revival. I was going to speak of a revival of some older forms of gaming that are out there, right? People have opinions about pixel art, and boomer shooters are becoming again, you know.
Yeah, that's right. I was big into boomer shooters. I guess I might be a boomer at heart in that. Honestly, like, that comes from my dad.
Well, I was going to say, like, the 17-year-olds of today think anyone at the age of 25 is a boomer. Exactly. I'm not a baby boomer, and look at me.
Yep. No, I really love like a genre that I want to call it story simulator or story creator. So there's a really popular, might be the wrong word. It's well known, but I don't think a lot of people play it. A game called Dwarf Fortress. And it has very old-fashioned art that looks like it's like from the 70s. And the graphics are just icons, you know, it's text almost. And but it's so advanced in. So basically what they've done is, like you mentioned, Dungeons and Dragons. What they've done is the creators of the game are two brothers. They will play a game of D&D, and then they will say, that scenario that we invented in playing D&D, that was amazing, that was fun, that was great, it was good storytelling. You know, you get a good game master, and it's a good story, it's engaging. And they said, how do we recreate that in a game format, in a video game? So that you don't have to have that game master person. So how do we implement that in code, essentially? So what they've done is made they simulate everything. So the main premise of the game is you have these dwarves, and you just tell them, build this here, this here, this here. And then they kind of just do what they want. And they might not do it because they're sick or they're hungry. And then you have to figure out, oh, I need to tell these ones over here to go get to where the food is. I need to tell them, stay away from this dangerous area, things like that. And there's just so much involved in that. So a game that I play sometimes that I have spent a lot of time with is RimWorld, which is basically a simplified version of that. Something that I can play with my limited time, and I can get a lot of good engagement out of it. I mean, it's a good game when you lose the game constantly, but you keep coming back to it because it's just so fun. I mean, it's just like every game is a new story, essentially.
Well, it's fascinating to me that you say not as complex or not as advanced as Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people often fixate on is graphics. Right. And so what you're talking about is the deeper complexity, the complexity of the experience itself.
Yeah. So you won't see amazing graphical representations of being a doctor and doing surgery, but that stuff is all simulated in the game. So everything that can go wrong with cooking a meal is simulated in the game. Every different kind of sickness is in there that food poisoning. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff like that. So mechanically, it's very rich, but graphically, I mean, the little guys walking around on the screen, they're not animated. They don't have legs. They barely change. Yeah, they just slide across the screen, and they go hunting, and the animals walking around the screen are very they're just very simple. They don't move at all.
Well, who didn't love Oregon Trail, right? Even that frustrating hunting mechanic.
Yeah. There's another game where it's fun to play it over and over, even though you lose.
Yes. Once again, you have died from dysentery. Well, this class is unusually structured in that there are 2 video lectures per week, and then you have what you've called office hours, right? So the normal Kepler structure is a pre-recorded lecture and then recitation. So our live time together is not lecture time; it's participation, interaction time.
Right.
You call this office hours. What's the reason for that?
Well, that comes from basically from a class my daughter was taking, and I loved the idea. It's almost like you come and you can talk to the teacher and ask questions and show the work that you've been working on to the rest of the class, and you can you can say, here's the art that I did for my game that I'm following along and making, and the class can say, oh, that's cool, or give suggestions or things like that. And we're going to kind of I suspect there will be a lot of questions about technical things in there. I expect that, and I hope students will ask those kind of questions and say, I ran into this bug, and I'll go, let's take a look at that. That's interesting. I didn't think of that, and we can kind of figure that out together. I mean, that's a lot of what programming is. It's just thinking through logical problems. So
I think it's fascinating that you're structuring your class a lot like an art class.
Yeah.
With the critique and the back and forth and the interactions people are creating. And
right.
I mean, Kepler is a homeschooling platform, a platform for homeschoolers, and I think this class is a great example of that, because really the students will be doing a lot of independent but supported work.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so they're gonna be doing the 2 lectures a week, which are about I'm going to try to keep them to about 45 minutes, 50 minutes around that mark. And then they will go and do the work themselves. So they'll use all the tools that I'm going to give them, and they will be working on the project themselves. And there will be certain points in it where I'll say, now here's where you can go crazy, tweaking things and making it your own project, essentially. It's your art. Of course, they can use mine if my art that I made real quick. They can use mine, but honestly, I think they should. I would hope that many of them would take the time and care to say, I want to make my own theme. I want to make this my own. Make good animations. I haven't, like, my art that I personally made for the first project is very, it's kind of just little characters and stuff, so they can really go nuts with it. And so they'll spend the rest of their homework time working on that, and then they'll come in on Friday and with their questions or with their creations, and we'll take a look at it. So yeah, and we're going to be spending essentially we're going to be making 3 games and then a 3D art project as well, some kind.
Yeah, and
throughout the year.
You mentioned the students will get to learn how to use the tools of the trade. So the
Right.
Godot game engine, Git for source control, Blender for 3D models and animation, Figma for 2D art and animation, Audacity for sound and music, and more. And so, this also brings up a question for me, as your course is called Game Development and Design. Right. Game design is one thing, right?
Yep.
And you can have it in the digital and the analog world, right? Much like a director of a film can have a certain vision, and yet he's not in the mechanics of it. He can't be in the mechanics of everything. So game design is one thing, game development another, and then just the use of the word development makes me want to ask, well, so students who don't necessarily have an ambition or a goal to be a game designer,
sure,
right? So just as a programmer, as someone who wants to learn just the skills of using computers for creation,
right?
What does this class offer?
Yeah.
What effect would it have on me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my goal is to get into the code on day one. So you are gonna be a programmer at the end of this class. You're gonna be well on your way to getting into programming if you want to, if you desire to do that. And it's not just, some people, there's some kind of bad advice out there about programming where someone will say, oh, this language, there's programming language wars almost, where they say this language is no good, you should use this one or something. I don't actually subscribe to those things. I say use the tool that and that you can get the work done with. And so we're going to be using the Godot game engine, and the reason we're using that is because it's free, and I like it because it's open source. And so that if you ever have a problem with it that it doesn't solve, you could actually dig into its source code and change it yourself. So there are other big game engines out there that are also free, like Unity and Unreal, things like that. There's other reasons why I don't use those, but those aren't technically open source. You can go and read the source, but you can't actually change it and release fixes to it and stuff like that. So so we're going to be using Godot. There's a language in there that's very much like the Python programming language. So it is its own thing. It's not actually Python. It has some of its own rules and its own quirks and things like that. And we're going to, but it is a real programming language, and you're going to be learning lots of good programming concepts in there as well. Another aspect is just the Godot game engine itself has so many little technical things that you may not even think about when you're playing a game. So most of the time you're not thinking about my character's jumping. Mario jumps, right? How how do we do that? it's actually kind of complicated, and it's also simple too. I mean, once you kind of grasp it, there's no, there's no jump code that exists automatically. You have to write the code. You have to actually know what is going on. So, part of it is there's like a gravity simulation in the game engine. There's a physics simulation. So you're going to be, writing code that works kind of within the confines of this simulated world, physical world. And so yeah, so the first, basically the first day, we're going to be moving, we're going to have a cube over here and a cube over here. And then you're going to program it so that you press a key and this cube will slide over this way and it'll touch this one. There's a treasure over here and here's your character, and it'll slide over there, and when it gets there, the game, it'll say you won. And that's day one. So you're going to learn how to do that on day one. And it's not much, but basically
so
we're going to just
make a complete game on day one.
Yeah, you are. Yep. So we're going to be expanding on it every day.
Yeah.
And I mean, every day, every class, you're going to be able to, show your friends, hey, I made this game.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, as a humanities person,
Mhm.
I love that this class is really ideal for dispelling, I think, a preconception or a misconception a lot of people can have, because you're going to get into the nuts and bolts of creation. Right. So if we're to be sub creators, I think we often have this feeling that we're just going to vibe out a creation, right? I'm just going to write this story. I'm just going to write this poem. I'm just going to learn this language. And then when we don't, it's like, oh, I don't have the gift.
It's hard.
No. You get into the mechanics of it. You get into the mechanics of the language, of the poetry. You start with the grammar, you hit the logic, you hit the rhetoric. And I can't imagine a better way of living that out than a class like this.
Yeah, there's really there's no magic to it. There's that, well, I kind of take that back, because there kind of is sometimes, and that's a fun aspect that I like about game development is there's some serendipity involved, but in sort of discovery. There's emergent behavior that comes out from things. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So basically, I love that, because I have written short stories and poetry and stuff like that too, and I agree. I mean, once you have the idea in your head, you say I'm going to write a story about this character who goes on a trip and they stop at a restaurant. But once you start writing it, you're thinking, how do they get to the restaurant? What do they do when they get there? What are they saying along the way? And does it make sense? And I mean, that's all there. And in poetry, you got meter and rhyme and number of lines and word usage and allusions and metaphor. I mean, you got.
And even when you're deciding not to do something, you have to know that you're deciding not to do it and what the effect is.
Yeah, it's like jazz music. The notes you don't play.
So sign up for Mr. Herrmann's jazz game development class. Well, I'm very excited about this course, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the students can put together over this year. Thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
So long, everybody.
Bye.